Do you want to hear my pitch?
I will listen to it as much as you listen to me talking about Matt Graver.
Draft Zero, a podcast about how to be passive-aggressive. Hi, I'm Chaz Fisher.
And I'm Stu Willis.
And welcome to Draft Zero, a podcast where two Aussie filmmakers try to work out what makes great screenplays work. Except for today.
Yes, because this is part 2 of our character motivations. It's not even a series because it's just a 2-part episode. And we're doing a bit of a kind of a workshop. It's almost like a mini writer's room with other people's scripts or movies, because only in one case today, look at the script. In essence, what we are doing is we're looking at films who have particular beats where the character motivation didn't work for Chaz or I. That's not to say that they didn't work for you, dear listener, or the general public, but that they didn't for us. And in our imaginary scenario, they didn't work for a director, producer, studio executive who have tasked us to fix or script doctor, or to just do a pass, a polish, something to come up, like we're doing a polish and they're like, oh, we need to work on this motivation, or it's a motivation we've identified. So it's an opportunity for us to kind of use the tools that we talked about in the previous episode, which I'll get you to summarize because I can't remember them, because that's how I roll.
/ can't be bothered to read the Trello board.
No, to put those tools in actions to see if they are helpful in a practical sense, because as much as Draft Zero is kind of, I think we're academic, but I think ultimately we're interested in stuff that is utilitarian.
And we'll see how utilitarian these tools actually were.
Yeah.
So the tools were character patterning, which we kind of used in two ways. One, for me, the primary idea behind it is just that a character is a pattern that is set. And in order to deviate from that pattern, you need to justify it earlier so that the breaking of the pattern is in some part of the pattern. You had a terminology that we didn't quite flesh out, but ever since that episode recorded so long ago, I've been thinking about it more and more, and I really like it, which is that characters have loops that they're stuck on without another input. And so, to leave that loop or to create a new loop, you need some kind of change to the system.
Which can be internal or external. I'm going to clarify that a little bit more because I had a bit of a Twitter conversation with Christopher Walker, one of our high-level patrons. So thanks, Chris. And thanks to all our patrons. We kind of clarified, he was like, oh, I really like character loop, but what's the difference between character patterning? Seems there's some difference. And what we kind of worked out is the character pattern is kind of the wake left behind the loop. The loop is actually the character. The character pattern is what the audience actually sees on the surface, but the loop is kind of what we as the writers think underneath. And they're useful because the pattern is kind of the evidence. Oh, they went this way, like a forager. But, what we think about the loop is a little bit more to character, because in some ways, when you change the input and the output, it may change the loop of the character, but on some level, it kind of also reveals more of who the character is. Yeah. In terms of how they behave. We gave that example with Luke Skywalker in the previous episode, His loyalty to his family in different circumstances is still loyalty to his family. We actually begin to understand that as a kind of like a fundamental of his character within the concept of Star Wars, and then that can become a shadow version of it, as in The Last Jedi, when things go so bad that he actually withdraws. Like, that's kind of the negative. Oh, God, the negation of the negation that I actually use. The negation, which I criticized in the newsletter.
Have we published the newsletter yet?
They will have the newsletter before they have this episode, so yes. Maybe.
Oh, dear patrons and dear listeners. I really like the distinction you've just made between the character pattern being what is revealed to the audience, what is experienced by the audience, and the loop being what is functioning for the writer underneath as they understand the character. Because to me, the pattern and setting the pattern means viewing decisions, like just having the character make decisions so the audience understands, that is what the character does when presented with these options, so that when you revisit them later, you can either demonstrate how the character has changed or not changed.
And in fact, it makes us feel when stuff is a choice or not. If the same character has sushi every day for lunch. We're kind of not demonstrating for it's a choice. It's a choice the characters made. They're just not made it on screen. So when they decide to have something else for lunch, and I'm using a very simple example, but that's actually the pattern. So we understand that is a choice to do something different.
Yeah.
But they've made a choice to have the same meal every single day. It's just not something we've seen on screen.
Yeah.
We're seeing a loop in progress, I guess.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you do. As we talked about in last episode with the commuter, we saw their daily routine over and over again, which a lot of this is to do with the time spent in establishing pattern. And we also looked at time in two ways. Amount of time spent just with characters, revealing their loops or patterns so that you can then later break them. But also when in the story you reveal these, you test these characters, you give them decisions. And we tended to come down a lot on decisions that happened at key structural moments in stories because they tend to be the ones that are really important for the audience to buy into.
Because often a sequence break is about the pattern, unless you're working on a procedural where the passing of the day is kind of naturally progressing the stories. Most of the time, the characters they reach a dead end and they either change who they are, they're educated or thwarted, to use that language.
Yeah. So after character patterning, time, we then had explaining or expositing or debating the decisions, both internally and externally, withholding the decision from the audience, revealing loops and patterns through backstory, creating or enforcing character patterns through the world, like the rules of the world and how they can influence decision making, and then trusty goal stakes urgency to just get the plot to drive the characters through these decisions.
To not give them much time to think about what they're doing either.
Yeah. And of course, all of this was about trying to solve the problem of this has happened and I don't buy it from the character. I don't buy that the character would do that.
Or in the positive, to get the audience to have a character like Luke Skywalker, who Skywalker, in the underseen Star Wars sequel, it's Luke Skywalker, to have a character who is loyal, and we get a sense of their loyalty, but also to get them to go on that Adamful crusade, to have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's important as a character. I don't want my bad guy to do, I don't want my good guy to do this, but how do we get them to do this?
Yeah.
Often in the case of revenge thrillers, the big bad is the person that dies by some kind of accident that's, karmically forced upon them. They trip over and are run over by a car and they leave, so we don't get them to do that anyway.
And unlike in part one where we had, I feel like, a good spread of genres and tones of film and, basically not just entirely superhero movies, when you ask for a broad audience to find character motivations they don't buy, often it comes down to these big Hollywood blockbuster summer movies where the characters are so archetypal and so clearly drawn that when they do something that feels wrong, it gets the most amount of people jumping down the throat of that decision or that movie.
It feels a little bit selection bias, but I also think it's because those kinds of film, and it's kind of a genre, the capital G, genre films, it's because they tend to be more about the plot. So there's less airtime given to the audience in terms of character.
Yeah.
Because what a film like, I was going to say like The Favourite, which is a favourite of mine.
Mm-hmm.
It is actually a little bit plotty, but at the same time, it's like a bit of a balance.
I feel like the beginning of The Favourite was super plotty, and then it just
relaxed into character.
They took their foot off the plot and just wallowed in character.
So the point is that character-driven films will tend to be all about motivation, or you questioning motivation. So in the case of In the Bedroom, when it does become here, and it's telling that In the Bedroom, which we talked about last time, multiple times, the third act thriller sequence is plotty. And that's kind of where we start to question motivation, because it's very clear that there's kind of character motivation in terms of them feeling grief in the second act. So that's why I also think there's a little bit of bias towards capital G genre. But I think there are techniques here and things that you can think about when doing character work. So with all my talk of genre, I guess we should reveal, and by we, I mean you, reveal what we're discussing today.
Yep. So we're going to be looking at Solo, a Star Wars story, Die Hard, Predator 2, Logan, Sicario 2, Prometheus, and potentially Martha from Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. And I feel that after rattling all those off, I owe Susie, our dear listener and Patreon supporter.
Yeah, you don't get an apology. You don't get an apology unless you're a Patreon supporter. That's one of the tiers. Only our apologies only if you Patreon supporter, given how many people we potentially offend. That might be a useful marketing mechanism. Before we do all that, I want to do my own little bit of follow-up because it helps us kind of transition a little bit, which is I did some thinking after listening to our previous episode about my issues with, you guessed it, Infinity War.
Avengers. I hope they remember you.
And it's interesting because it's actually a misdirect what they did. Like, it was good writing. So I rewatched it with my nephew. Well, actually, he watched half of it and then went home and I watched the other half. So, if you remember, my biggest issue was this decision by Black Panther, I'm going to butcher his real name, in relationship to Vision and this idea that he made the decision to sacrifice many people in order to save Vision. And it's a misdirect because the issue, I think, that they didn't want us to think about because it's to do with our empathy towards a character, potentially, this is me imagining a conversation that may want to happen, is that ultimately they make a point of saying Scarlet Witch is the only one capable of destroying the Mind Stone.
Thanos has the biggest army in the universe, and he is not going to stop until he gets Vision's stone.
Well, then we have to protect it.
No, we have to destroy it. I've been giving a good deal of thought to this entity in my head about its nature, but also its composition. I think if it were exposed to a sufficiently powerful energy source, something very similar to its own signature, perhaps, its molecular integrity could fail.
Yeah, and you with it. We're not having this conversation.
Eliminating the stone is the only way to be certain that Thanos can't get it.
That's too high a price.
Only you have the power to pay it.
Completely by her vision. Completely by her motivation there, right? Like it's kind of sympathetic, even if she's blinded by love. The fact is, though, she is holding everyone else hostage to that. And I don't think there was an acknowledgement by everyone else that was the case. All it would have taken is Black Panther's like, well, I'm not doing this. We should just kill Vision. And she's like, I'm not doing it. And he realizes the only way to get her to do that, she will, like, ultimately she does do it because she's not completely evil, but she wants them to try. And I think there's a way of refocusing it, which is more that tension of her affection for one individual was overriding her judgment when it came to the consequences, the collateral damage to everyone else around you. I think that's a really interesting thematic idea, but it may make us say that word that produces hate. And it's something that we're only beginning to now to unlock, which is, oh, she's such a bitch.
Yeah.
If it was a male character, it probably would, a male character with a female, if it was the other way around, I think they may have called out on it. But there is that just that seemingly an unwillingness to allow, because I've got notes like this, allow female characters to be unlikable to that extent, that we're still afraid of having female characters that are unlikable, that there was these kind of, that they completely misdirected consciously or unconsciously from the fact that ultimately the reason they couldn't, that Black Panther had to do it wasn't because it was even his decision.
Yeah.
It's that he was forced into it from Scarlet Witch, and he actually had no agency over that.
Yes.
And he could have said, all those people are on, the blood of all my soldiers are on your hands. And she's like, fine, they're soldiers. You know, she could have actually been really cold about it, but it says a lot about her relationship with Vision. And she could have said Vision is, let's face it, unique.
Yeah.
He's the only one of his kind in the universe. Like there is something, like she could have turned the calculus around. Anyway, that's kind of my transition moment because I was like, if this was me, that's what in this workshop, that's what I would have proposed. And it could have been, it would have come down to exposition, you know, not a reveal, but it would have been not a withholding decision, it would be an expositing decision to use that tool. But it's not a decision because it's actually them holding.
Well, they did withhold it.
They did withhold it.
That's how they got all of the audience members
On her.
past you.
Yeah, because they probably agree with her. Like, yeah, you shouldn't have to sacrifice it because that's a horrible thing.
Yeah.
I need to try and to talk Scarlet Witch into killing Vision.
Yeah, or, they all agree to try, and then suddenly she sees, you could have had a moment where she's seeing the cost of it all.
And she does.
Yeah.
And they call it out and say she's on the board.
Why was she up there all this time?
She's on the field. Take it.
Right? That she just wanted to see them try. Yeah. Right? That was what's important to her, which is, again, fair enough motivation, which is the easy option here is just to kill Vision. Let's make sure we actually try to save his life before she will do what is necessary.
Yeah.
And that is something that we would understand that she would be willing to ride that thing really close to the line. How far should be prepared to take that before she's like, okay, I will kill possibly the only thing in the universe that will love me.
Yeah.
The thing in a non-pejorative sense. Like, I just don't want to genderize Vision. Mm-hmm. Even though, poor Batten, he's a pretty nice specimen.
Yes. Who also appears in Solo. And, I mean, look, this Infinity War is a good example because one of the things that we were kind of butting up against when we were choosing our homework, and we almost considered doing a whole episode, one on kind of main character decisions and then a whole other episode on secondary character decisions, is because secondary characters often don't have the luxury of time being put into them to justify their motivation. So they're either extremely archetypal or stereotypical or part of genre conventions, or they have those horrible motivation dumps at the beginning and never have that challenged.
Or at the end,
yeah,
when they're tying up, James Bond is lying on the table with a laser slowly creeping up to cut him in half. And this is my evil master plan, and this is why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a pilot. Best in the galaxy.
Heard about a job. Big shot gangster putting together a crew.
Who are these guys? Han Solo. Lando Calrissian.
Whoa, is that a Wookiee? If you come with us, you're in this life for good. You in?
That's yes. I got a really good feeling about this.
And so my issue with Solo is actually the character motivations of one of the secondary characters, not Han Solo himself, although I do have some issues with the motivations of his character in that film, but actually the Woody Harrelson character, who I'm Googling right now.
We should have Googling music rather than just cutting it out. We should have like... So everyone knows that we're kind of like looking up stuff. And so it doesn't sound like we're like encyclopedic movie nerds, even though we are.
So the Woody Harrelson character called Tobias Beckett.
Oh yeah, it's like a play on Samuel Beckett.
Yeah. So this also ties back to the dichotomy of what you identified in this intro is the difference between the pattern of the character as revealed to the audience versus how the character may be functioning to the writer underneath. And the way that the reason I don't have any issues with the fact that Beckett ends up double crossing Han at the end, but I didn't understand his motivations in that double crossing.
So please, Chaz, explain to me what form this double cross took.
It's magnificent. How'd you do it?
Wasn't easy.
No, I mean, how'd you do it? Looks exactly like the real thing.
That's because it is the real thing.
Yes, and I'm saying I would believe you. It's that good. But my associate already told me about your plan to rob me of my money and give the real coaxium to Emphas Nest.
Dren, I don't know what you're thinking or what Kira may have told you.
No,
I
not
would
Kira.
never.
Not Kira. Kira, it turns out, has a weak spot for you, and we'll deal with that later. No, I'm talking about my other associate. Can you come in and join us, please?
I am sorry, kid.
Why?
Come on, don't look at me like that. You weren't paying attention. I told you don't trust anybody.
So, we have to lay out what Tobias Beckett's decisions that have been revealed to the audience to this point, right? The decisions that he makes is you meet him in a war zone, and he's planning a heist.
Impersonating an officer, yeah.
Yeah. Han tries to blackmail his way in on the heist.
I just couldn't help but notice you're wearing a uniform pocked full of laser burns, so either you heal real quick or you stole it off a dead man. You're not Imperial Army. You're thieves here to steal equipment for a job, and I want in.
Well, now we gotta shoot him.
No. Snap his neck. It's less mess.
And Beckett has Han, thrown to a monster. So, first decision, Beckett doesn't, seem to value Han or life or whatever, fine. But then Beckett ultimately decides to take on Han and Chewie in the face of objection from his lover,
Val.
Our whole future depends on this one school and you bring in amateurs.
In case you hadn't noticed, we're a little short-handed.
So we get who we need. The Zan sisters, or Bosk. But no. Instead, you're putting our lives in the hands of morons.
I've actually wished that Val survived and Beckett died, but anyway.
Absolutely, because here's the thing, right? They're doing their classic tropey one last score so that they can retire and he can play this instrument in this distant planet.
Plus, have you ever tried to disinvite a Wookiee to anything? Not a good idea.
This is not funny.
Look, I have great instincts about these guys. And besides, do you see any other options?
I just hope you know what you're doing.
I know exactly what I'm doing and why. We're going to clear our debts. Go back to Leonson. And I'm finally going to learn how to play that valichord.
Oh, babe, you're never going to learn how to play the valichord.
But she dies during the heist. And from there, there's still later mentions of him going back to this planet and learning to play the instrument, but I never buy that. Because that was Val. Like, Val was what he was retiring to, not this planet or the instrument. And I don't think after her death, there's a lot of goal stakes urgency getting him from decision to decision because...
You have any idea what you've done? We were not stealing for ourselves. We were hired by Crimson Dawn.
Crimson Dawn?
Now we owe them 100 keys of refined coaxium. When they find out we don't got it, they're gonna kill us.
They are under threat. They are making decisions based on survival. And so goal stakes urgency get you across all of these plot points, get him on the adventure together. And, they're bonding with Han, even though at one point he says in dialogue,
We got a good thing going here. Me, you, Chewie.
Yeah.
Right? The makings of a solid crew. But it does not work with Kira.
It worked with Val. You trusted her.
You want to know how I've survived as long as I have? I trust no one. Assume everyone will betray you and you will never be disappointed.
Sounds like a lonely way to live.
It's the only way.
That to me flew in the face of all the actions that he had been demonstrably taking by trusting
And so,
everyone around him.
yes. And it ended up being an unintentional theme because we had a similar problem with Han Solo, which he was a bit he was one of those people that tells everyone he's an outlaw, and as the film, and he's not really. And in fact, what was disappointing about Solo is that it made his journey in A New Hope less meaningful, right? Because essentially, it's the same thing.
Yeah,
he gives them it's like, okay, so he's always that kind of person. And there is an idea or an interesting version of that, which is Solo is someone who convinces himself that he's an outlaw and he's kind of in denial about his goodness.
Well, I've got no problem with Solo being an outlaw. I think he was an outlaw. He did every action he took in the entire film was illegal, according to Imperial law.
Yeah, it doesn't make him as bad.
But my issue was he wasn't a scoundrel at any point. And then, Kira's got that throwaway line.
Okay, outlaw, you can tell yourself that. But I might be the only person in the whole galaxy who knows what you really are.
Yeah.
What's that?
You are the good guy.
Well, he was always a good person in this movie. I've never seen him make a decision that was selfish. He fucking launches the rebellion, and then in the beginning of The New Hope, he wants nothing to do with the rebellion.
Yeah.
Anyway, taking Han out of it, what I needed to buy Beckett's motivation of the double cross at the end was to know what he actually wanted in life. Why did he want this money? He wasn't just a guy who wanted money. He wanted a life with Val. So what did he want in the absence of Val?
Just more money. Yeah, it's like...
And so I felt like all I was missing was a scene where they actually mourned Val, and we saw how Val's loss changes him, affects him.
Hardens him.
And changes just purely what he wants as a character. I have no idea what he wants as a character after Val's death.
He probably doesn't know either, and it's okay for him to be lost, but then that is different. Like if he's seeking revenge against Han and Chewbacca because he blames them, you know, that is different. And then he's darker. But I guess it, you know, coming back to, I think you could have had the same film with Val alive, but her attitude to those two would have been a lot different because she was always unsuspecting.
Yeah.
She probably would have just dumped him at, you know, when they did the Kessel Run.
Yeah.
And that's the difficulty. I mean, maybe what he really wanted was a family. Yeah. But then you don't get that moment where he betrays them because ultimately what he really is after is a family.
But if he really wants a family, why is he double-crossing them for money? If he's feeling lost, why is he double-crossing them for money? If he wants revenge, why is he double-crossing them for money? Like,
it's kind of, that becomes like a genre motivation thing, which is you're meant to understand that it's a Western. And that really, that's what Western, you know, it's the archetypal thing. And maybe something that will become a theme is the difficulty when dealing with what both genre awareness and genre blindness. So genre blindness is when characters don't realize what kind of film they are. Most famous examples are in horror movies where they do stupid stuff because they don't realize they're in a horror movie. And some films go out of the way, like when zombie films are a good example, when characters have no idea what to call zombies, like they've never had a zombie film, right? And it's like an alternate reality is like, you're laughing, but we know what it is, right? Like we've all seen those movies where they're like, they don't know what to call it. And we all do. Genre awareness is kind of the opposite, but it's usually on part of the, or like there is the genre awareness for the character where they do recognize it. Zombieland kind of played around with it a little bit, but also there's genre awareness in terms of the character where it kind of tries to get us over the speed bumps of story by leaning into genre tropes. Yeah. Like we don't need to explain to Tobias Beckett's motivation here because we are waiting for the double cross, because as soon as he said you can't trust anyone, you kind of know that he's going to betray him.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't have to build much motivation into it. It's archetypal.
And a lot of our problems here, and I think we're going to come back to this, is that we already had a loop established for Han from A New Hope.
Yeah, the difficulty of writing a prequel. He's no longer, even though they tried to correct it with he's the Han who shot first at the end of the film, and I'm okay with that. I would have just liked a little bit more of a prologue where Han's a little bit more ruthless, but he should learn that, and I guess the idea is that he learns that ruthlessness from Tobias, but we don't have enough access to Tobias because Tobias no longer has a confidant to say, I'm going to double cross these poor schmoes, because the main, he could have had a scene with Val when she's calling him out on it, and it's in private, and he's like, we can, if something goes wrong, we can give their heads to
Dryden Boss.
To Dryden Boss. Like, we can actually pin this on them if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
You know? And he blows it up, and it is Han that blows up this shit. Like, why he, like, Han ends up talking his way into it, and that's cool, is the idea that Han always just talks himself into trouble. It's such a great loot for Han. But the original plan is, from him and Val, is that we can use his naivety as a weapon, and we see that at the end. Because that's why he betrays them, because he thinks they're weak and naive. And Solo's actually learned from him.
Yeah. I mean, all of that would be interesting and instantly better without having to restructure the movie.
It's a scene. Maybe they even wrote the scene. We don't know.
Yeah.
As I'll talk about with Prometheus, because I actually will get to my issues in Prometheus in the future. But I went back to John Spath's draft when it was Alien Genesis.
I thought he was Alien Engineers, wasn't he?
Alien Engineers was the 4th draft, and Alien Genesis was the 5th draft.
Okay.
I went to the 5th draft.
Okay.
And it was a scene that they was like, oh, this would have solved my problems if they shot this scene. Maybe they did shoot it. Sometimes take out things from the movies.
Yeah, because I want to highlight here, like I you were saying he learns to be ruthless from Tobias, and I'm like, where in the whole movie is he being ruthless? And then I'm like, actually, that's not fair. In the very first meeting of Tobias, he's extremely ruthless and has Han killed to his knowledge, right?
And then he sees him as tenacious. Yeah.
Maybe the writers and the producers and everyone there go, well, that's all we need. We've established Tobias as this ruthless, callous man. But
it's once.
Then you're fighting against the fact that you've cast Woody Harrelson. So maybe I'm not being entirely fair on the writers either.
Yeah, Woody Harrelson always manages, like, he's charming. Yeah, casting is an issue. We want to deal with narrative stuff. Like, not me going, you need to recast Woody Harrelson, because they'll be like, fuck you, Woody Harrelson's in this movie, you're fired.
Yeah.
It'd be like, well, we got Woody Harrelson, what you can be. And it could be that he's just an opportunist, right?
Yeah.
Like, he's like, they're naive, we can use them, they can help us out. If they turn out good for our game, great. If they screw up, then we can give their scalps to Drayden, right? And I think it's just a moment between them, and it's the scheming, and as much as it's exposition, I think in the context of that relationship, it would have worked, because it's like game night. It's a couple who have a pre-existing relationship, and to me, it would have worked. Enough, maybe.
It's character exposition.
I mean, it's like a writer's room. I'm pitching my idea, and I'm going to be like, my idea is the best.
But that's what we're talking about here. And the one thing that I like about this, we're not trying to pitch the best ideas here, but just in us going back and forth on this, I can instantly see very, very short amounts of time added to this film without changing the structure of it that would make me enjoy it more.
Or we've just got access to, instead of it being a reveal that he's double crossed him, we could have actually, instead of doing a reveal moment like in the bedroom, revealing the decision, we're actually with Tobias when he decides to betray them.
Yeah. And I think you said this when we were talking about the double cross as a reveal. It's like, what was the point of that reveal? It could only be two people. It could only be Tobias or Lando Calrissian.
Yeah, and the surprise was for the character, but I think actually that would be my other option, is we followed him, like he has the fight. He looks at them, looks at the shitty shit. Like, he's got nothing left. The Millennium Falcon's not his. He's lost Val. He's lost everything, and he's like, fuck it. And if we have that moment and then followed him going, and we're like, oh, don't double cross Han Solo. Han Solo's walking into a situation of dramatic irony, and it's not about the surprise that Tobias has betrayed him. It's what Han's reaction is to. That would have been another option. And I've pitched this before. I was in a writer's room today, and I'm like, do we want dramatic irony or surprise? Often we lean into surprise because it's such an immediate response for the audience. It's the gasps from the audience going, and it's kind of, it's like a laugh, like it's an immediate dopamine hit as a writer. And I've been guilty of this, that you lean into surprise, but often dramatic irony can be more emotionally complex for the audience. And sometimes we should actually go, no, let's not do the surprise. Let's know, let's know that Tobias is going to betray him, because that means we see the motivation in action.
Yeah.
He could be, because what's his name could be like, why are you doing this? You're not going to buy an instrument, and he could be like, no, I'm going to get another. Like, in the end, I would totally buy that Tobias is going to be one of those people that like is going to work until it kills him. He's got nothing else. He's got nothing to retire for. So Tobias will be one of those people that will almost become self-destructive in his behavior. And maybe the betrayal is a form of self-destruction. And that's okay. But we don't have access to it because they play it as a surprise. So that's the other pitch. Rather than it being a setup, it's let's stay with the character and not hide the decision. Let's actually see them make the choice. Because we don't see that choice. It's the choice is a revelation. Let's be with them when they make the choice.
Yeah.
All right. Should we move on with Solo?
Yeah. Well, I think then the point that you've made, the reason why you want to bring up Die Hard is here we've got...
It's a good example. That's why I'm talking about it, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, I'm not bringing up like how I'm going to fix Die Hard, because the answer is I never could. It is the perfect film.
Within this skyscraper high above the city, 12 terrorists have declared war.
They're about to be taught a lesson in the real use of power.
They're as brilliant
because I am interested in the $640 million in your vault
as they are ruthless.
And I'm telling you, you're just going to have to kill me. Okay. We do it the hard way.
Now, the last thing McClane wants.
Think, damn it, think.
Is to be a hero.
Where's Howling? Hey, Tucker! Where?
But he doesn't have a choice.
What does he think he's doing?
Job.
As much as in our part 1 we had bad examples, here in our part 2 we are occasionally going to, talk about some good examples as well, for the purpose of contrast.
Yeah, like they give us access to Hans Gruber's a lot. Like he is definitely, we got a lot of POV of Hans Gruber, and part of it works because his motivation of Hans Gruber and his crew, the fact that they're criminals and they're terrorists, is a significant plot point. So I'm pretty sure that the audience is clued into him being a thief before anyone else is. Like, they end up playing it for dramatic irony.
Mr. Takagi, I'm really not interested in your computer. But I need the code key because I am interested in the $640 million in negotiable bearer bonds that you have locked in your vault.
But the point is, they give a lot of airtime to Gruber because, it's partly motivated because McClane's like, what are they fucking doing here? Right? He wants to know.
Yeah.
And then he needs to convince other people. But it's fundamentally built into the plot that they need to convince everyone that they're terrorists. So it's a very clever way to give us access to Gruber and his motivation.
So just to clarify and summarize, the reason why we are so certain of Hans Gruber's character motivation in the theft is that it is built into the plot as a reveal. Like, they're using his character beat as a plot device.
They're well financed and very slick.
Well, now how do you know that?
I've seen enough phony IDs in my time to recognize that the ones they got must have cost a fortune. Add all that up, I don't know what the fuck it means, but you got some badass perpetrators and they're here to stay.
Because it ends up also then becoming what's the double cross that he's doing on the FBI, etc., etc.
Yeah.
But the point I want to make is that we get an incredible amount of access to Gruber and his crew, the effects of John McClane on them.
That it goes to time, because we have time with him as a character, we can be very clear on his motivations, and his motivations are not complex. His plan is complicated, but not his motivation.
He just wants to be rich.
Yes.
$640 million in bearer bonds.
After all your posturing, all your little speeches, you're nothing but a common thief.
I am an exceptional thief, Mrs. McClane, and since I'm moving up to kidnapping, you should be more polite.
So it's dramatic irony, and it's everyone else catching up. So we understand his motivation, but they actually turn it into a question: when will McClane work this out?
And importantly, like in contrast to Tobias, what we're talking about here is character motivation. If the audience understands the motivation, they will buy the decision, right? And in the case of Tobias Beckett, I've got no problem with the decision. I just have no clue as to what his motivation was.
And I think what I propose will give access to it. The other example, in a simpler level, because it's more of a monster movie, is the RoboCop sequel, Predator 2.
Predator 2. He's in town with a few days to kill this Thanksgiving.
Man, I rewatched it at your place because you had the Predator box set. And I'm like, man, this feels like a Paul Verhoeven movie. I remember really liking it as a kid, and I'm a big fan of Paul Verhoeven. And I rewatched Predator 2, and I'm like, feels like a RoboCop sequel. And I go to Letterboxd, like thinking I'm gonna like drop some like mad insight to the film, and there's so many other comments. It's like, this feels like a RoboCop sequel. That's really awesome. And it's like, oh God.
I'm sorry, you're not more original, Stu.
Yeah. But there's this moment with Predator 2, and it's not because they've got to build the mythology of the character, right? The first film that we learn is a trophy hunter. The Predators are trophy hunters, right? That's pretty much all we learn about the Predator. In the second one, there's two moments, and they play hand in hand. Because in some ways, it's a serial killer. This guy's Donald Glover's. And I love that, Donald Glover. His team, are they a gang squad? I have no idea. Are getting kind of wiped out by the Predator and blah, blah, blah. But basically, there's a moment where a kid sees the Predator and has got like a toy gun or a water pistol and like aims at the Predator. And we're like, oh shit, the Predator is going to kill this kid. And then he uses the heat vision and realizes the weapon's on a weapon.
Want some candy?
Leaves the kids alone. So we kind of understand that there's some degree of ethics. There's there's rules to how the predator acts.
Yeah, rules to the character
of the predator. Like they're turning, because they're giving the predator choices beyond killing. They're turning the predator into a character.
Yeah.
Because it's making choices. It's no longer acting instinct, and it's not coming back to the antagonist thing. It's not that you feel like you can negotiate with it.
Yeah.
But maybe you can. Maybe that's a potential, because as soon as you're making it choice, it's not a force of nature in a meaningful way like the aliens or something. There's something else going on.
But that beat gives us so much. And look, I don't want to say the obvious too much, but it is essentially a save the cat moment.
It is.
They've given the alien force of nature a save the cat moment, but it does so much.
It's like giving Jaws and Jaws 2 a moment where it's Jaws 2 sees the kid and it's like, no, I'm not eating the kid.
It is absolutely like that, and that would completely change your experience of Jaws as a
creature, yeah. It gives it personality, and they reinforce it, because what happens is they reinforce the beat. So Maria, who's the female, no, that's the actress's name, Detective Cantrell, works in the gang squad. You can see he looked up Wikipedia. Works in the gang squad with Mike Harrigan, who's played by Donald Glover. And she is with Bill Paxton, who plays Detective. And Bill Paxton's in this film, but he's fun. He's actually really fun. He's with Detective Jerry Lambert, and they basically the Predator gets onto a subway train, and it ends up being this. It's a really cool shootout. Actually, it reminds me a little bit of the shootout in Snowpiercer, because it's like almost like all strobe lights, and he kind of the Predator kills Jerry Lambert. And Cantrell runs on the station to try and get passengers off the train. The Predator comes up to her. And then the Predator realizes that she's pregnant. Like, basically, the Predator vision is like second heartbeat, looks at the baby, and lets her go. And she never reappears in the film at all. Like, the fact that he saved her is inconsequential to the plot. They actually gave the Predator a character beat.
Yeah.
You're right? And then it ends up, in a weird way, paying into the third film when you're not the third film, in the end of the film, when you I think you begin to realize that the Predator is young, or that it ends up building the mythos of the Predators. And in fact, I would say probably turned it more into a franchise than those beats made it more of a franchise than the first film.
Yeah.
Right? And the idea that these are characters in themselves, and we can explore the idea that they're cold-blooded killers and make them heroes in a way that the aliens have never been, I don't think. In Aliens vs. Predator, of which I've only seen snippets and seem horrible.
I've only seen the first one, I think.
The aliens are still the villains, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's how you do it. 2 scenes like that.
So what we've done here is we've just had a brief I know we've started on a tangent, but looking at secondary characters and how it doesn't take a lot of time to provide your secondary characters with the pattern or the loop or the depth that they need, such that those important key decisions that they make in relation to the primary characters later in the film are motivated.
Yeah, because that Predator thing never pays off. Like, it doesn't save Mike Harrigan's life. It's not like Mike pretends to be pregnant. He doesn't like in the first film, Arnold Schwarzenegger covered himself in the mud. Imagine if in the end of Predator 2, Donald Glover straps a baby to himself. It's like armor. It doesn't play off plot wise, right? We're laughing, but there's someone who pitched that, right? Imagine that he's got a baby beyond. Imagine that. That's my pitch. That's my guys. This is my pitch for we're going to ignore the Predator. My pitch is that it's going to be someone fighting a Predator wearing a baby beyond.
All right. So another broad character-based problem is genre blindness, as you alluded to earlier. And I had less of a problem with this than you did, but we're going to talk about the homestead sequence in Logan.
The world is not the same as it was. Mutants, they're gone now.
Not yet.
Who is she?
You know who she is, Logan. She needs help. Where we're going, there are more of them.
Something's happening to you, Logan. You're not healing.
That's right. The old man.
So, Logan is kind of, I don't even want to say it's based on the Old Man Logan comic books. It's like nominally, it will claim to be the last of the Hugh Jackman Wolverine films. It's not really plot-wise connected to the previous films. There's just enough hints to tie them together. No mutants, which doesn't tie into it. It's much as just part of the dystopian. No mutants have been born for 25 years.
Have you heard the wonderful fan theory about the X-Men films continuity and Logan? That all the other X-Men films...
The comics.
...are like the comic books that he gets shown.
Oh yeah, Charles, we got ourselves an X-Men fan. You do know they're all bullshit, right? I mean, maybe a quarter of it happened, and not like this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anyway.
I mean, what do you need to know? I'm not going to summarize the whole film. What you need to know is Logan, bleakness. He takes care of Charles Xavier. We learn that something has happened in Charles' past. He's kind of got a bit of dementia.
A degenerative brain disease in the world's most dangerous brain. What a combo.
Meanwhile, Logan runs into Gabriella, who tries to hire Logan to escort her and an 11-year-old girl, Laura, to Eden, which is they claim to be a refuge in North Dakota, right?
Can we just make it clear in terms of character motivations? The character motivations are...
Initially.
Yeah, mutants are dying out, and the only thing that Logan wants is to get Charles Xavier somewhere safe where...
He can't hurt anyone else.
Yeah.
That's super important.
So that's Wolverine's motivation. And they're in a world where mutants haven't been born for 25 years, so they've given up all hope of any sense of cause other than this one want. And what upends all of this is the discovery of the little girl who is a mutant. Anyway, homesteader sequence.
So essentially they've been hired to escort Laura. Gabrielle dies. They end up through an argument. I think it's an argument. It feels like it's slightly accidental. Disrupt the automated trucks, which drive a family with some horses off the road. The horses run onto the road. Xavier uses his powers to get the horses back, and Wolverine helps, and they offer them dinner.
Come on, Laura, let's go.
Well, can we show our appreciation, treat the three of you to a decent meal? We don't live far from here.
No, that would be lovely.
Which I buy.
They've got to eat somewhere.
You got to eat somewhere. Stop with them. Logan's like, we should go, and Charles, and they're having a lovely time. Like, here's a moment, and there's that sense of the sort of Damocles, because we know they're being pursued. So my issue, it's not just genre blindness, because it's actually my genre awareness. I know this is the homestead sequence. I know what is coming. I've seen enough films where it's like, oh God, they're going to stay with the family, and the family, collateral damage. They're going to bring the fight to them, and the film kind of like explicitly kind of draws your attention to it by showing you excerpts from fucking Shane. Violence follows you. No shit. But the thing is, Wolverine knows this.
2 days on the road, only one meal and hardly any sleep. She's 11, I'm fucking 90.
Oh, there's 101 reasons to keep moving.
I'm not a box of avocados, Logan.
And then what? We stay the night, then what?
Logan in this film knows that everyone he loves gets hurt. So does Xavier. The hidden subtext, which on this rewatch came to me as like, oh God, the other X-Men died because of Xavier. I mean, it's in there, but it actually hit me earlier because they play it as a reveal, like through the radio stories about Xavier and the fact that a few hitmen died in that incident. And because I was dramatic irony for me this time around, I'm like, I get that Logan is trying to hide Xavier from the truth, that he's hurt people he loved, but Logan is completely aware of it.
He even says it. Like, there's a couple, at least one line, it's been a while since I've seen it, but where he says, we really shouldn't stay. We really should be moving on.
You know, Logan, this is what life looks like. A home, people who love each other, safe place. You should take a moment and feel it.
Yeah. It's great.
Logan, you still have time.
Charles, the world is not the same as it was. We're taking a risk hanging around here, you know that.
Oh, no, he knows. Like, they all know they're being pursued. But Charles Xavier is kind of slightly naive and like, oh, we need to be happy. She seems happy.
No, but he's also trying to work on Logan as well. He's trying to convince Logan that there's things to live for, people to care for.
All makes sense. Charles' motivation makes perfect sense. It's fine. I'm not questioning that. And then Logan is like, okay, go to bed. We'll stay.
So is that the decision you're questioning? Logan's decision to put Charles to bed at the homestead rather than putting him in the car and leaving?
Yes, but I don't buy... It's not that I disagree with that decision. I'm not convinced that he thought they were going to stay the night. I think for me, to fix this issue for me, because I'm like, they know it's a problem. Of course it's a problem. X-24 turns up, kills the whole family, and kills Charles Xavier. I think, that's a heartbreaking moment. Like, there is so much to love about this film. This is a tiny little beat that I'm talking about, but it stood out for me, and I don't think I'm the only one that was like, why did they ever decide to stay in that homestead? Why did Wolverine ever agree? Like, he knows they're all in danger. He knows they're a threat. He knows that Charles Xavier is a threat. Charles Xavier just nearly killed a whole bunch of people at a casino. Like, the film's explicitly gone out of the way multiple times to say they hurt the people they love around them. Why does Wolverine agree to stay? And the answer is he shouldn't. He's appeasing Xavier. Xavier goes to bed, and they're walking to him and the father of the family walk to deal with the water, and he's like, we'll leave after this.
They go to show the city guys the Shane beat of, they basically go to the pub to brawl.
Yeah. And he could be like, but before that happens, he's like, look, I was just saying that to make my dad happy so he could fall asleep. We'll get back. He'll be fast asleep. I'll put him in the back of the ute and we're going to leave.
Yeah.
That's all I needed. Because otherwise, I do not believe that he would have stayed there for 12 hours. Like, everything in me is going, this is a bad idea. You know it's a bad idea. The only reason you're staying is because you need the plot to catch up to you. You need the plot. You need the bad guys to catch up to you. And that's exactly what happens. And it wouldn't have worked. Like, I completely belie. He's just a little bit too slow in moving on.
Yeah.
He's happy to slow down, and that still would feed into his despair. In fact, it's going to make his despair worse if he's like, I shouldn't even help this guy. Helping people just kills them.
Yeah.
Right. That's it. That's all I would have done to fix my issue with that. I don't know if anyone else had the same issue. Maybe you can all write in and go, no, it was fine. I completely buy that him and Charles Xavier, the mind that's a weapon of mass destruction, would stay overnight at someone's house while they're being pursued by murderous killers. And I'll still tell you, you're freaking idiots. We all know that's no.
Anyway, I don't want to kind of, this is sort of turning into what we're teetering on the edge of what I'm afraid this episode could.
The Dark Shadow version of Draft Zero.
Yeah, where we just like...
Drunk Zero.
Where we just hammer movies when you and I both love Logan and we're...
Yeah, it's like a 9.5 out of 10 film. This is like, it lost half the mark out of 10 for the... Yeah. Just give me that moment where you show me that Wolverine understands and he's just trying to he's appeasing him, but anyway.
Yeah.
Should we move on?
Yeah. When we were choosing homework for this, because we've been planning this bloody episode for so long, at a certain point you texted me and said, hey, have you seen Sicario 2? And I was like, yeah.
There's proof the cartel helped the terrorists get to the border.
The president's adding drug cartels to the list of terrorist organizations.
You can understand how that will expand our ability to combat them.
You want to see this thing through? I'm going to have to get dirty.
Dirty is exactly why you're here.
You're going to help us start a war.
With who?
Everyone. No rules this time.
And we both have very different character motivations with Sicario. And I'm excited to get into this for a couple of reasons. I think it's a really strong example for a couple of reasons. One is you and I both love Taylor Sheridan as a writer, and so this is not us just jumping on a bandwagon to attack a broad, big blockbuster.
We love him as a writer, but also he only basically writes men that express themselves through violence.
Yeah.
Oh.
The other reason why Sicario 2 is a really good example is that it is a direct sequel, and the two different main characters, Alejandro, played by Benicio del Toro, and what's Josh Brolin's character's name?
Matt Graver.
Matt Graver. Okay, so Graver and Alejandro, we've had character loops and character patterns established by a previous film.
Yeah.
So, it's almost like a TV problem. How much time do you have to do to break these loops? So, which one do you want to do first?
Well, it's been a while since I've watched it, and the film's faded from my memory. Plus, apparently there's I was talking about this today, which is that there are things that Trump's talked about in his speeches about the border that are images ripped out directly from Sicario 2. So,
yes, there's, I think, some troubling political aspects to Sicario 2.
I think Sicario 1 was definitely delved into the complexities of this, and this is more special activity divisions of the CIA are badass, and really we should just let them operate within US territory.
But I feel like you've got the same problems with this that a lot of people had with Zero Dark 30 and subsequently with Detroit, which is, I don't think the film is painting these characters as people to be looked up to.
Except for the third act.
Okay.
Right, which is Matt Graver. So talking about patterns, one of the ways that they re-established Josh Brolin's character, because as much as it's a direct sequel, it is kind of like a Tom Clancy war porn, and I like Tom Clancy.
I'm watching Jack Ryan right now.
There you go. It's also telling that Tom Clancy's pre-war on terror.
You think I'm going to waterboard you, Bashir? Waterboarding is when we can't torture. This is Africa. I can do whatever the fuck I want here. You're going to answer every question I ask you without me harming a hair on your head. Do you want to know why? Because if you don't, I'm going to call in an airstrike on your house.
Because basically what this film is trying to do is say the Mexican drug cartels are people smuggling and they take money from terrorists, right? It's trying to, and this is the political stuff, muddy, we should be afraid of drug cartels because they're in bed with terrorists. Josh Brolin, Matt Graver, they go out of their way to show in the beginning, Matt Graver, basically to get a terrorist to give up some information, or a potential terrorist to give up some information related to some terrorist bombings within US territory, uses a drone to
blow up his family.
Yeah, his brother, and one by one, no remorse. And Graver is a shark. He shows no kind of empathy. He's a psychopath. He's like a high-functioning subclinical psychopath. He shows no empathy to the terrorist at all when he orders these drone strikes.
Is that your brother? Because I don't want to kill the pool guy.
He is absolutely feels entitled to use violence as a means of operation.
Which is completely in line with the loops established in the first film. The difference with the first film is that even though Graver was arguably the driver of the plot in the first film, and for new listeners, we did a deep dive into Sicario as an example of how you can divide character functions between a protagonist who drives the plot and then a main character who is the point of view experience character. Because in Sicario 1, Emily Blunt's character is the point of view character for the audience, even though she has very little agency and very rarely drives the plot. But so Matt Graver, in that opening sequence, he's completely re-establishing the loops and patterns established in the first film. Now, I think I'm going to go first with this because my character points happen earlier in the plot. So
you can then summarize the plot. I'm letting you do that.
Yeah. So broadly speaking, he tortures someone to find out that cartel is smuggling people across the border, and they happen to also be smuggling terrorists across the border into the US. So the mandate of Matt Graver is to disrupt the cartels.
Next week, the president's adding drug cartels to the list of terrorist organizations.
You can understand how that will expand our ability to combat them.
The cartel territories are fairly stable at the moment, but as we learned in Iraq, striking your enemy is a whole hell of a lot easier if they're fighting each other.
That scene cracks me off because he's like, oh, we're going to disrupt the cartels in the same way we disrupted the power base operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'm like, yeah, because that worked so well. Like, are you guys fucking idiots? The reason you've been fighting ISIS is such an issue because exactly of how you fucked up post-war reconstruction in Iraq. Like, he was just so like blindly dumb. And maybe I'm just meant to believe that these characters were arrogant enough to think that they did a good job. Sorry, this is me getting geopolitical.
Okay. So, in order to start this war, Matt Graver goes and enlists Alejandro's character.
No rules this time. Turning you loose.
How loose?
Carlos Reyes. How's that for loose? It's your chance to get even for your family.
Now, for those of you who don't know, in the first film, spoilers as always with Draft Zero, Alejandro takes over the first film for a sequence late in the film where he goes and murders the sons and wife of a cartel leader in front of the cartel leader.
Before killing the cartel leader.
Without any compunction. And then returns to threaten Emily Blunt, the point of view character in the film. And Matt Graver's offer here is, hey, Alejandro, this is that guy's boss. You can kidnap the daughter of that guy's boss and trigger a war there. Great, he's on board. So that character loop is also reestablished, that this guy will do anything to further his revenge against the people who... It's a revenge plot. His family had been killed by the cartel. Blah, blah, blah. So those loops and those patterns are firmly reestablished in this film. They kidnap the daughter. They take her back to the US. They then fake, for her benefit, the idea of the DEA rescuing her from having been kidnapped from the cartel, so that when she gets returned to her father, allegedly she'll back up their story that it was the other cartel that's doing it. So far, so good. They drive back across the border to return her to her father, and suddenly they find themselves under attack by their Mexican police escort, as well as by other cartel members.
Shit, Oscar 1, incoming on your right.
There, I see nothing.
Contact right.
I don't see anything. Oh, down.
This is where I had my first major character issue, and partly it's because I had no idea who the fuck the people attacking them were working for and what they wanted. Do you have any theories?
Well, I just assumed the implication was the Mexican police were corrupt.
Yeah, but and working for the cartel. I assumed, my assumption was, they were working for the father of this girl to get her back, even though they were driving to make an exchange. But
that then implies that the father already knew that the Americans had them, and therefore the idea of having him turn against the other cartels wouldn't have worked. Unless then it's one of the other cartels, like this is the stuff that they don't explain, unless it's like Cartel B who learns that the DEA, yeah.
I'm kind of all right being lost at this point because the characters are lost.
Yeah.
Okay? Where I have issue is that in this shootout, the girl runs away.
Isabel.
She runs over a hill and flags down a car, she's run away from the DEA and from the cops. She's run away from the shootout. She flags down a car, and it happens to be a car from one of the surviving members of the shootout on the Mexican side. He's a bloodied man. He gets out of the car. She sees him. He sees her, recognizes her. He goes to grab her and put her in the car. The decision I don't buy at this point is why that those two people don't have a conversation. I don't understand why she doesn't say, who are you working for? And he says, your father, not your father, whatever. I don't understand why she runs away from that bloodied man. I mean, she's a young, precocious teenager. Let's just say she wants to run away from a bloodied man who was just involved in a shootout around her. Okay. Then Alejandro shoots that guy at a distance and rescues her, and she decides to go with Alejandro without that decision being debated either. So I don't understand why she doesn't trust the Mexican guy. I don't understand why she suddenly trusts Alejandro, because none of this is debated. They then get into their own little homesteader bit where Alejandro talks to Matt Graver, finds out that the CIA is burning him.
They want me to cut ties. You gotta get rid of her.
I can't do that.
What are you telling me?
Not this one.
And then Alejandro decides to take this girl back to the US in some way to protect her. Okay, I have no fucking clue why Alejandro wants to protect the daughter of a cartel leader when that was the very thing. Kidnapping her was what got him on board with the mission, and the previous character loop that's been established is that he happily murders the children of cartel leaders.
In order to prove a point, yeah.
They're trying to turn Alejandro's character and Matt Graver's character in this film, but I don't buy the turn because none of it is debated or contextualized or told me why this is different to the last time.
It's a hard thing because it's not like he's got a confident, and this is the difficulty a lot with character motivations is access to characters. So I buy the idea that maybe he's keeping Isabel alive because that suddenly gives Alejandro access. He gives him leverage, both with the CIA but also with the cartels, any of the cartels. So either the guy that he wants to kill or whatever. So I actually kind of accept that he might be like, okay, it's we both played the Game of Thrones board game that was based on Cosmic Encounter, and there's this mechanic with holding hostages, right? And you threaten to kill them. And what's clever about it is you threaten to kill them and people may capitulate the hostage. But once they're killed, you actually have no more leverage. The act of the killing is the moment that is also a moment when you lose power. So sometimes you call people on their bluff because if you don't need them on a functional level, you actually have power over them in a weird way. It's like, well, I'm going to kill them. And it's like, well, okay, you killed them now. You've got nothing.
Yeah. Okay, so I buy the decision that Alejandro tracks down the girl to take possession over her because that's still part of the mission at that point.
And he's a consultant to the CIA. And he may need leverage against the CIA, but then he no longer... Yeah. He doesn't use her as leverage against the CIA.
No.
When she could... Both of them could turn around and go, the CIA kidnapped this daughter in order to start... Like, that's actually, worth something. Because in fact, the CIA, the reason they want to burn him is that they want to make sure that there's no loose ends. Right? That they can't be implicated because effectively the Special Activities Division has done a military operation in foreign borders without permission. Borders and the idea of what is legal military operations always makes me laugh. And both of us have studied. Well, you are a lawyer, and I've studied when I did international law. It was like, ultimately, it's like
it's about power.
You justify. It's about power, and if you can get away with something, you'll do it. And if part of getting away with something that achieves your political aims militarily is by appealing to international law, you will do it. But if ignoring international law achieves those same aims, you will do it. Countries are not ethical. They're like corporations. They're psychopathic. Right.
Yep.
Anyway, the point is that, he would have had power in terms of if he could have whipped up press frenzy.
Yeah.
He could have used the girl as leverage. That's why I buy him because I never know why he's keeping her. Like the idea that he may be just doing it because she's a girl of around the same age, which the film calls out. And so I think you're possibly legitimate in thinking it, that's all they're trying to mean to say, oh, you're about the same age as my daughter before she was killed by the cartel. But I think it just gives him more motivation for holding on to her as some asset.
Hopefully my summary shows that I think a lot of the decisions you can come up with some explanation for them until the decision where he goes, I've been burnt and I'm going to bring this girl back because that's the best way to guarantee her safety. He starts acting out of her safety rather than his own self-interest. And
yeah, he basically turns rogue to keep her alive.
Yeah. So I don't buy that decision. But interestingly, I might have bought that decision had it not come on the back of a whole lot of decisions where, as I've just talked them through in summary, I can find motivations for them, but I have to engage in an emotional exercise. Like I'm not in the film because I'm sitting back going, why is he doing that? Why are they doing that? What is happening here? So suddenly you've got all these very quick back-to-back moments and character decisions where I'm not clear on the motivations of any of them. And finally I get to one where I'm like, no, I'm fucking out. And they do have he's digging a hole. I can't remember why he's digging a hole, but they have it's a beautifully written scene.
You're the attorney whose family they killed.
Not they.
My father.
A man who worked for him.
Why?
To send a message.
Now you hunt them. So you won't be a message.
I will always be a message. Only now, the message is different.
But I think it's the writer and director thinking this scene, this beautifully written scene, and we'll play the excerpt, is enough to get us over this moment, and it's just not enough. It was not enough for me to believe that he would...
Actually, no, I'll take it back. Yeah, that he would willingly try to get her over the border to make her safe, as opposed to, I'm going to get her over the border and getting to talk to the US, like the press. You know, and that is the irony, as much as I'm left-leaning. Like, he could absolutely get them into the Atlantic or something and go, we're going to have, or Martha Jones, we're going to have an expose about how the CIA conducted this illegal operation in Mexican territory. You can see that would absolutely give him revenge against the CIA because he knows he's burnt. He wants revenge. I don't think he's concerned her safety at that point. So, you know, I take it back. I agree.
I don't feel like he wants revenge against the CIA. I feel like he has this understanding because they operate, you know, kind of outside of official missions, that he just understands that this is the way it goes. What I don't buy is that once he knows he's burnt, that he just doesn't walk away and leave the girl or shoot her in the head.
Or uses her in a different... That's what I mean, like, uses her against the other cartels. Like, there's so much...
Yeah. None of that decision really doesn't make sense. Now, let's say this is what the writer wants to do. He wants to turn the audience, give the audience insight into Alejandro and turn the audience's understanding of him away from the character pattern and character loop of a revenge psychopath to someone who's still got some humanity left in him. It's a redemption arc in that sense. Then one easy thing that I would have potentially considered doing is the moment when she goes over the hill and she flags down the car and sees that it's this man of violence who she wants to run away from. I would have actually played out that scene in the distance from Alejandro's point of view, where he's just sitting there watching this happen, considering his options. Do I let this man take this girl, or do I intervene and stop him? And that would have obviously taken away from the tension of that moment, because she's, you know, being kidnapped and carried away. Like, it's a very visceral, the camera's very close. So you're trading off against the moment by moment intensity for character. But what that would have given us is at least, we spoke about in part 1 of this character motivations episode, the debate can be internal. If we see a character debating, then we buy that whatever decision they make at that point, we just have to accept that that's what they make because we've seen them debate it.
That's true.
So if we see him debate, I could let this girl go, but there's something in me that makes me want to rescue her. And ultimately, it could just be because, one of the things that in the first film, when he murdered the cartel's leaders' children, they were both boys. Am I correct in remembering that?
Yeah. Yes. Feels like it.
And he could have potentially been okay with murdering boys, but not with murdering girls.
Yeah, or she said something, or I think you could have added, and you give the Isabel a save the cat moment. So in fact, the film gone out of the way to show that she's kind of entitled and a bit of a brat. She picks a fight at school and she feels protected. But she has a moment of compassion with is he blind? In the homestead sequence.
He's deaf, isn't he?
Yeah, and then we learn that Alejandro's
daughter was deaf.
He can sign. If she's got a moment of genuine compassion towards this man, he might go, maybe there's hope. She is not going to become like her father. Right? And I guess you could say, well, it's, the drug cartels are super patriarchal. I guess maybe that is true. But there's no doubt that she is a enabler of that. She knows who her dad is. I think I would have bought that, like just enough, a moment where he's like, maybe I'm wrong. As opposed to you're the same age as my daughter. Well, and I am becoming like, because it's dependent on him having a moment of self-reflection to go, I am becoming like the people that I hate. Right?
Wow.
Because he's a lawyer. Before he becomes like a super assassin, before he's a super assassin, he's a lawyer, right? Like that's why they target him.
Yeah.
He's a lawyer going after the cartels to make an example for him and they kill his family. All right? That's the backstory. And then he somehow very miraculously develops these incredible like super assassin powers. Okay, I'll buy that he's got nothing else to do in his life but like become badass. Right? But he still wants the cartels, always wanted the cartels. But there needs to be that moment to show that he's capable of coming back from wherever he's been on. And have a moment where he has a moment of self-reflection saying, yeah, okay, this is escalation. This is what escalation looks like. Maybe we need to de-escalate. And that by saving her, is actually a better way.
But I don't think I would have bought that. We've seen his character loop where he is so consumed, he is so broken that he murders children.
Okay. So he's okay. We're doing a workshop, but rather than try to keep it within that thing of, because what they're really trying to do is put the Josh Brolin character and the Benicio del Toro character at odds. They're meant to turn these people that Matt Graver and Alejandro, who are as much as you can be friends in this world, friends.
Yeah, but is that what they're trying to do? Because they never have a moment of conflict between them.
Not in terms of they're turning against them in terms of plot.
We can't risk her falling into the wrong hands. When the beacon's activated, your team takes them. You understand? Clean the scene. When I say clean, gentlemen, I mean spotless, your operative included.
Do you know how hard he was to make?
I could throw a stick across the river and hit 50 grieving fathers. Make another one.
Can't do that.
Well, look who doesn't have the stomach for it now.
Oh, who are you to question me after all the shit that I've eaten for you?
I put a lot. He's trying to be cold about it, and you get the sense of like, oh, they're kind of as friends can be in this world. I buy that Brolin is not interested, but that's what the plot-wise the film is trying to get them to. So Matt Graver is sent in a couple of Black Hawks over the border to put the girl down because they've got a GPS tracker and kill Alejandro if he's there as well.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to put them in loghead. So what happens if Alejandro kills the girl? They're not going to know that she's dead. They're still going to have the GPS. They're like, okay, she's still there. That's a pretty confronting moment for Matt Graver to come in and go, Alejandro killed the girl. We got to hunt him down now. Right? And in fact, the film goes out of its way not to put Matt Graver in that position because Alejandro is killed or seemingly killed by a gang member that's involved in the human trafficking. They have a whole B plot that's more or less just to set up. So Alejandro is seemingly killed by this young kid, right? So Matt Graver doesn't have to do it. Matt Graver thinks he's dead. And then Matt Graver just has to go over the girl.
Fuck it all. Wipe it clean.
The reason is I think these are related. My issue is when Matt Graver decides to take the girl and put her in witness protection rather than kill her on behalf of the CIA.
What are you doing? Matt! You're fucking us! She said spotless!
Fuck them all. We'll go into witness protection.
He's going against his training and saying, as much as I'm happy to use drone strikes against a terrorist family, a 15-year-old girl's too much. Borderline, it's relying on kind of like audience ethics rather than character ethics, because there's probably, I think the terrorist claims that there's family, and there's probably family in those buildings that he blows up. The difference is maybe it's first hand as opposed to a drone. There's a big difference between hitting spacebar to wipe out a family and having to pull the trigger yourself. And maybe Graver finds himself, he's got the gun on her and he's like, no, I can't do it. Let's take her. Right? That's a step too far. I'd buy that. But he makes a calculated decision because he feels that he's been asked to turn against his friend. That's my interpretation of it. Again, so if I'm tasked with solving this, it's very hard because the third act, they're trying to set up a third film, which is that Alejandro is still alive and he's decided he's got it in for the CIA. He tried to kill him. That's my interpretation of it, right? And that's cool, but it feels like they've kind of done convoluted backflips to make us feel like, oh, they're both better people than they are, which is that they're like they're psychopaths who are employed by the government. They're serial killers who take credit cards, right? To quote Suicide.
While I was not listening to you talk about Matt Graver's decision, I figured out how I would fix the Alejandro decision. Do you want to hear my pitch?
I will listen to it as much as you listen to me talking about Matt Graver.
Draft Zero, a podcast about how to be passive-aggressive.
There's nothing passive about this.
I would have, as soon as Alejandro learns that he's been burnt, he goes, yep, okay. He pulls the gun on the girl and is about to shoot her. The father, the deaf man, deaf homesteader, comes in and witnesses it, and Alejandro kind of has to justify why he's about to shoot a little girl and ultimately can't, and then realizing that he's been burnt by the CIA and can't kill this girl and that she's unsafe, that he has to take her to the border. And that would create a really interesting kind of dynamic between her and the girl, because he's kind of her best option out of here, but that doesn't mean he's trustworthy.
No, I think they should play into that. That's how I would do it. Is I think it's okay to be kept in his dark for his motivations to keep her alive, but the fact is her alive is a lot more useful to him than her dead. And he seems like someone who wants to have options beyond, like if he's lived beyond, I've sought revenge and killed the person that killed my family.
Yeah.
It's like, well, in that case, I want to bring the cartel down, and her alive is more useful to me than dead.
Yeah. But we haven't seen that. Like, that is absolutely what's happened, but I haven't seen him be calculating.
He's the Sicario. He's the assassin.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't seen him have planning agency.
Sicario, Judas Iscariot. Just to point out, this is the etymology of the word.
Very good. All right. So now that we've pitched fixing Alejandro, let's pitch fixing Matt Graver's decision, which is, why does he save the girl?
Well, the problem is, it's not like he's like, I'm going to put her in witness protection, because it's like a bit of a fuck you to the CIA, but it's not really. It's not like she's going to go out of the way to like dob in the CIA. More dobbing in would be, I'm going to go to the press, right?
Why does she even want to go? How'd you keep someone in witness protection who just wants to go home to Mexico to her powerful father?
That's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I don't know. I'm dark, man. He should have shot her. That's my solution to that, which is accept who he is. Like, the next film should be like, I'm on Alejandro's side. Like, Matt Graver is a piece of shit. Like, let's be clear. The CIA Special Activities Division are not a institution in which whom we need to ethically defend, who are known for their kind of like morally upstanding attitude to warfare, right?
But it's fascinating. The point you made earlier about the spacebar, maybe they should have leaned into that.
That he couldn't do it. He couldn't pull the trigger.
They could have had a line that he couldn't do it, and the guy. I think there's even a line where the subordinate is asking him like, "Why are you doing this?" Or "What are we going to do with her?" or something like that, and he's like, "It's different to pushing a spacebar," or something like that, like some callback to the beginning of the film, so that it gives us an insight into the character that this guy can play war games and be cold and calculating, but he can't do it upfront and personal.
Yeah, because it's that whole thing. We think it's like, oh, she's 15, you wouldn't kill her. And I'm like, what if she was 16? No, 17. Maybe. How do you know she's 17 and like 15? Like, how do you make that snap judgment, right? I don't know. I'm not someone who's ever pulled a gun on anyone, yet alone on a child. But, you know, and okay, she's not a threat. But, you know, you don't go into the CIA special. They've gone out of the way. What is it that made his loop change? Because essentially what we're trying to say, Matt Graver is beginning to question the ethics of what he's done. Okay, that's really what they're trying to go into. He's beginning to question that because they want him to kill Alejandro. Maybe, but then why save the girl? Like, surely it's better to be a wolf in sheep's clothing and to be like, I no longer trust the CIA, but I've done what they've done. Or, like, go all the way. I mean, maybe this is the problem because they're going to do a sequel and we're going to find out what happens to her once he's back in US territory. You know, because the thing is, if it's witness protection, that I'm assuming it's no longer the CIA, because the whole point of the first film is the CIA are not allowed to operate within US territory without an attached domestic agency, right? And there's also all the anti-sedition laws in the US, which I've actually read due to another project, some of them. That maybe you'd hand them over to the FBI, and then the FBI could be like, okay, we're going to actually lay legal action against the what's her name character, Catherine Keener, right? You know, we're going to go after her for doing something that was an illegal operation, and they're going to lead heads roll. That's cool. I would have wanted to see some of that into. I don't need to necessarily see his decisions in the moment, but if I saw some of the consequences, then I might understand his decision in retrospect. So maybe a prologue where she's handed over to the FBI and they're going to go after Catherine Keener would be like, okay, that's what he's after. That would have actually done it for me in the same, but instead they've made the prologue, the epilogue. And that's what I said, not a prologue. They should have an epilogue where that's what's happened. Have an epilogue where Alejandro
and the boy who shoots him,
and he tries to recruit him as an assassin. And that's okay. It's trying to be like, but it's actually in terms of character motivation. If we don't understand in the moment, then we need to see the consequences and go, that's what he's doing. That's really smart. Because her in witness protection program with an FBI person suddenly gives Matt Graver leverage over Catherine Keener. He's been, who's like her superior. And suddenly that puts him in an interesting political power within the CIA if they don't know where she is. And it's a bomb that can go off. And so you're like, okay, that's what he's done. Like, he's pissed off at the CIA, but he doesn't care about the girl.
Yeah. But it's really hard to debate that in the moment, in the context of what they're doing. That would require the addition of an extra scene.
But just shoot the extra fucking scene.
Yeah, okay, sure. But what I find interesting is that in our pitches for fixing this movie, the two different tools that I feel we've wanted to explore most is one is debating the decision, because in both of them, they make the decision and we don't buy it and there's very little discussion about it. And the other thing that we're missing is understanding the motivation of why they break their loops, because they are fundamentally breaking their pre-established character loops. So if they're going to break them, should they have set the pattern or seeding in the beginning of this film, this sequel, that the patterns that they'd established in the earlier film are cracking?
Well, for example, Matt Graver did spacebar on the brother of the terrorist, and he could be like, the brother's family's there, and he's like, no, they're not. You're lying to me. You're just trying to meet. Presses the spacebar, gets a report. They found 3 bodies, and he's just like, like you can see a moment where he's like, okay, that's the price. And you get that moment of like, had he been in that moment and knew, maybe he wouldn't have hit the spacebar, right? So we get a sense that there's a line there, maybe, but we never know because it's kind of moral testing. And a listener of the podcast has talked about that before, that, you know, we can all talk about our morality as I want, but until we're in the situation until that morality is tested in fire, we never truly know what we think.
Yeah.
And he will never know. He's like, well, I'm not the person to kill a kid. And the answer is he needs to prove it, or he pretends to the CIA it wouldn't have mattered. And you can see Catherine Keener doing that. By the way, do you know that we actually found the body of 3 15-year-olds at this compound that you bombed? Would have you still pressed the button? And he hesitates a moment and goes, yes. But we as an audience go, I think he wouldn't have. And then that would have paid off. It's like the opposite of Chekhov's gun. It's like Chekhov's not gun.
Well, another moment of character patterning is in that meeting that he has early on where he lays down his plan to kidnap the girl and to set the cartels against each other.
Just to be clear, you want to see this thing through? I'm going to have to get dirty.
Dirty is exactly why you're here.
He is quite confrontational to them. Like, he knows that they need him and his input. And so he's not deferential. He's not very respectful. In that moment, he could just ask them, like, he could debate, like, what's the point of it all?
Yeah.
You know, we don't need to be as on the nose as what you and I are debating right now, but what I hope we're getting to is just an indication of how seeding these cracks early on in the film would have allowed us later in the film to buy that the loop gets broken.
Yeah.
Or that a new loop gets established.
Because there's a crack, we're already showing that there's a weakness. Yeah, that's kind of like a tool in its own way. It's not showing that the loop is changing, but that there is some kind of like fissure line, you know, and that you can chip away at it.
Mm. And I do wish I'd said this at the beginning of the podcast.
Maybe you can move it.
Ooh. I think there's a massive difference between a character decision that you don't buy in the moment as you're watching the film and a character decision that you don't buy after having watched the whole film.
You mean the refrigerator logic?
Yeah. Because one is something that's broken and the other is undoubtedly a compromise. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Some of it also is the genre stuff. Like, I think they're leaving into this idea that Matt agrees there is a genre of like hardened killers who soften around children and decide they don't want to kill children. And that's like a trope.
Yeah.
Right. And I think they're leaning in that maybe in the moment gets you over to the bump. And I've certainly got an example of getting you on the bump potentially in the moment in Prometheus, which I want to move on to next.
Well, yeah, I would like to move on. It was thinking about Prometheus that actually made that point, because the biggest issue I have in Prometheus is not an issue I had in the moment, but actually in watching the whole film. And there's a big difference in the bedroom. Every single moment that happens in the bedroom, I buy in the moment. Where I have issue is thinking about the whole film and all the character motivations at the end of the film, having watched and experienced the whole thing. And I think these issues that you and I are having with Sicario 2, and really all of the films like Solo, Logan, and now we're going into Prometheus, the biggest issues that you have are the ones where you go, I don't buy that as you're watching the movie.
Yeah, and then on further reflection, you're like, nope, still dumb. Have you thought of an example? I suppose there have been examples where I kind of get it. And I'm saying that with Infinity War now, but it's taking me a lot of thinking to go, I kind of get that they've been held ransom or held hostage by Scarlet Witch. But what I'm like, do they actually understand that's the case? Like, I now understand their motivation.
I feel that they let her off the hook by Captain America taking the fall for that decision.
Yeah, but I don't think they're trying to show that Captain America is like white knighting her. Maybe that could be the new like version of Captain America. It's just like the White Knight, and he's just like a superhero that just like white knights everyone. Still played by Chris Evans, because I think he'd be up for that. That's my pitch for, I don't know, SNL sketch
My favorite, my favorite thing that I read today on the internet was a Guardian article about a photographer taking a whole lot of pictures of vulvas, and it was about like getting to know your vulva. And a guy said it's not a vulva, it's a vagina. And the comments that followed, the guy mansplaining to women what the name for their genitalia was just gold.
But he just digs himself into more of a hole because it's like, I'm talking about the kind of like common understanding. It's like, no, you were like, you started off doing like the technically precise term. Oh, God, that was hilarious.
He was trying to tell women what the common understanding of the name of their own body parts. Anyway, oh my God, so brilliant. Anyhow, Prometheus.
Prometheus, are you seeing this?
Whatever that probe is picking up, it's reading life form.
What do you mean a life form?
Oh, the head.
Changing.
Changing into what?
It's moving? These things moving?
What is that?
There's a ship.
They're leaving.
To go where?
Earth.
We were so wrong. Take us home! If you don't stop it, there won't be any home to go back to.
Why is that door open? Cut it off! Cut it off!
So, I know that I've got one decision in Prometheus that I want to discuss with you, but do you have main ones as well?
Well, I think this is the idiot ball. Okay, so there's kind of two examples I want to talk about. There's I don't think it's an idiot ball example, and I kind of buy it, which is when David chooses to poison Holloway with the black goo.
Yeah, that's my issue. But yes, carry on.
Right. And weirdly, having rewatched it for the first time in the cinemas, so I was like, no, I didn't kind of like, I in the cinemas, I was like, I want to know why he did that. But I wasn't like, there's no reason for him to do that. And there is a difference. And then the other difference is when the geologist, they're related. There's a whole, basically it's the B plot, the geologist and the biologist, from when they run away from the main group to when they get lost to when the snake creature in the attack formation is like at the biologist who's run away from being too scared, is like, hey, gitchy goo, let me like pat you. Not that far, but it's just like, meh? That to me is idiot ball, because essentially it's the horror movie trope of these people getting lost in the haunted house.
Yeah.
And so I actually went back and went to the John Spates draft to understand where these problems may have come from. Because I'm not sure if the Prometheus script is out there, but I know someone, probably John, leaked the non-Damien Lindelof draft. Because there's that whole and the Wayland, you know, what's his name, Guy Pearce in makeup turning up in the end of the film as being old. That's to do with character motivation, and that's what Damien Lindelof he changed the overall drive of the film in his draft from essentially in John Spates' draft. It's about them wanting terraforming technology from the engineers, and it's not like, where did we come from? It's like, we're going to steal their technology, and it's about that the hubris of man. Like a very science fiction idea of, we're going to steal, quite literally, the fire from the gods. We're going to steal the terraforming technology from the engineers. And that leads to us becoming undone. Whereas in Prometheus, it's obviously a lot more about, I want to learn how to live forever. I want to meet my maker.
Should I summarize the film before we get to these two different particular decisions?
Please do.
From memory, Prometheus is the prequel to Alien, Ridley Scott returning to the franchise famously, and it is set in the world where they're going to a far off planet where, unlike the other Alien and Aliens films, this is a scientific research mission, and the scientific team led by Noomi Rapace's character, Elizabeth Shaw, she has uncovered, ancient prehistoric drawings that she's interpreted as a map across the stars as to how we can find our makers. and off they go. Now, they've been in hypersleep, whatever it's called, on the trip. The only person that's been awake is the android called David, played by Michael Fassbender. And in their initial explorations of the alien ship, they uncover several things. One is is it the space jockey from Alien?
No, because it's not the same ship. What we do see is them uncover, there's like the flash, like these weird, like pixelated visions of the space jockeys. So in that way, yes, they see the space jockeys. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so they find a head of one of these engineer people, but one of the other things that they find is a vial of black goo.
Which we've seen in the open, which we've seen in the cold open.
Yes. Of an engineer who's like a sort of proto-human type alien. He drinks it, and by drinking it, dissolves himself, so he essentially commits suicide to spark life and evolution on a strange planet, which is Earth, isn't it? Or is that the idea?
That's the implication because of the dissolve, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not life, because the thing is the planet's already got plant life on it. This is one of the things that are frustrating about the film when you look at it in hindsight. They've kickstart life. No, they kickstart an animal life.
Processing. DNA. Match.
Oh my god. It's us. It's everything. What killed them?
Anywho, David is analyzing the goo, and he puts the goo, a droplet of it, on his finger.
Big things have small beginnings.
And Holloway, which is Shaw's, another research scientist, but happens to be Shaw's husband, David has got a drop of the black goo on his finger, hovering over a drink that he's about to offer to Holloway.
You think we wasted our time coming here, don't you?
Your question depends on me understanding what you hope to achieve by coming here.
What we hope to achieve was to meet our makers, to get answers. Why they even made us in the first place.
Why do you think your people made me?
We made you because we could.
Can you imagine how disappointing it would be for you to hear the same thing from your creator?
I guess it's a good thing you can't be disappointed, huh?
Yes. It's wonderful, actually. May I ask you something?
Please do.
How far would you go to get what you came all this way for? Your answers. What would you be willing to do?
Anything and everything.
It's worth drinking to, I'd imagine.
And ultimately, after having that conversation, David dips his finger into the drink, thus poisoning the drink with the black goo, and hands it over to Holloway. Holloway drinks it. I've seen it both in cinema and on Blu-ray back at home. So I think I've only seen it twice.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember distinctly feeling when I first saw that is I don't understand why David has done that, but I fully had confidence in the filmmakers that at some point later in the film, they would explain to me why David had done that. And my issue with the film is that at no point in the future does it ever explain, nor even in Alien Covenant, the sequel to Prometheus, does it ever explain why the fuck David poisons Holloway.
Well, they just double down in Alien Covenant because he wipes out an entire planet.
Why would it further... ultimately, this comes down to character motivation. I don't understand what David's character motivation is at this point. I don't understand why, no matter what his want is, whether it's to find out what the black goo does, whether it's to, find the fountain of youth for Wayland, whether it's to spark new life, whatever it is, poisoning the lead scientist on your research trip. Why didn't he poison anyone else on the ship?
No, I don't know if he's the lead. Okay, so the context they've set up for this, having watched
You've watched it much more recently than me.
So for me, I definitely had the same thing of like, oh, why is he doing this in the first time around? Second time around, having seen Alien Covenant, where clearly David's a psychopath who wants to wipe out humanity, I now rewatch this with like, oh yeah, they're definitely hearing out David a lot. And the fact that he makes reference to the fact that, you know, he's only looks human because it makes humans feel more comfortable. You know, so it definitely feels to me it's a decision that makes more sense in the context of Alien Covenant.
Is that fair of us to assess a film after having seen its sequel?
No. So I'm going to point out more specifically what they do in the moment, which is just before, like, it's basically a run of, there's a scene where he is speaking to someone who we do not know who it is through that hollow interface so he can speak to them in hypersleep.
No, sir. I will take care of it. Yes, sir. Understood. I'm sorry. Fortunately, slightly premature. Of course, sir.
And then Vickers kinds of interrogates about what he's asking. And then he talks to Holloway and it's like, what would you be prepared to do to find out the answers? And he's like, anything. And he's like, okay. And then he poisons him. So I think it's trying to create a chain of events. I'm not saying it's effective, but as writers, they're trying to create this idea that you're like, okay, he's a robot, different sense of morality, not mortality, but that too, where he is prepared to just basically do an unauthorized experiment to see what happens in order to do the bidding of whatever we now have learned is there's another presence on the ship that is pulling his strings.
Yeah.
That's what I think is meant to get you over in the moment, that he is doing it in the moment in order to make what is revealed to be Wayland happy. Right? That's what I think what they've tried to do. I'm just not, obviously ineffective.
I get that. And it bumped me in the moment, obviously ineffective. Here's my very knee-jerk pitch to making that better, is that he does the experiment on anyone else other than the lead fucking scientist on the expedition.
He's not the lead scientist. He's a scientist. What specific skills does I would say Shaw's the lead scientist. What skills does Holloway give other than speeches?
Okay.
What does Holloway do?
I would have done it on a mechanic or Idris Elba, the captain of the ship, you know.
All of them seem far more important to the running of the ship than Holloway. Holloway actually seems the one who's the most expendable.
Well, then, if that's the case, look, again, you've seen it more recently than me. If that's the case, that would have sold it for me if David has actually... If the question wasn't about what are you prepared to do, but it was actually David assessing who is the least effective person on the ship or the least necessary person on the ship, if that's what the conversation was about, that would have been fascinating. Because as you said, the audience is already clued in that David's up to something.
Yeah.
What pisses me off over at the end of the film is that doesn't serve any of his nefarious Wayland purposes. And as you say, in the context of Alien Covenant, it's because he's a fucking nutbag. So, fine, but we don't know that in the context of this film. In this film, his decision is never justified, but I would have at least been happy to know, yep, he's conducting an experiment, and it would have been in line, you know, talking about genre conventions, you know, the android in these films is always the...
Except Bishop in Aliens. Aliens is the subversion of it, which is why they do it in Aliens.
Yeah, that's true. But they're always the emotionless... You distrust them because A, they're not human, and B, because they are programmed by people who don't also care about humans. So David is fully living into that trope, right? So I would have bought that he experimented on someone. I guess I needed to know why he chose Holloway.
Okay. It could be like he said something like, well, I've got someone in mind. Like they could have just done that little bit more of the conversation to feel like I've got someone that's expendable, because I think Holloway is expendable. Shaw is the one that's shown to be extremely competent. Holloway just gets drunk. It feels like he's a tourist, right? Like it feels like he's there because he's Shaw's partner. The reason I brought up John's draft is that scene with David is not in it.
So is Holloway, is there even a point to Holloway's character then?
Holloway is actually a little bit more competent. So it feels like they've split in the original draft, Holloway and Shaw seems to be able to do everything in this film. Like, she operates on the alien head, and I'm like, hang on, what's her research? Is she an archaeologist? Like, why is she operating on this head? Is she a doctor? Or maybe she's an archaeologist and she's dealing with like a biological sample. That's fine. But it felt like there was no, as you say, I don't think there's any point to his character.
Let's move on to the second one, because I feel that...
Let's move on to the film that's actually made.
Yeah.
So essentially what happens is, this is a classic idiot ball example, and idiot balls on TV tropes, and I'll just give a link. So there's two characters who we meet early, one who's a geologist and one who's a biologist, and they are called Fifield, played by Sean Harris from the Mission Impossible films, and others, but that's probably where you'll most know him from, and Rafe Spall, who plays Milburn. So Fifield's a geologist, and he's a bit tattooed, got a lot of attitude, here for the money, but he's a scientist. And then Milburn's like his kind of like sparring partner. Like, it's like a buddy cop comedy.
Yeah. They're trying to replace the trucky guys from Alien.
So you're saying we're here because of a map you two kids found in a cave, is that right?
No.
Yeah.
No, not a map. An invitation.
From whom?
We call them engineers.
Engineers? Do you mind telling us what they engineered?
They engineered us.
Bullshit.
Okay, so do you have anything to back that up? No, I mean, look, if you're willing to discount 3 centuries of Darwinism, that's... Woo!
Right, so they go down with the main crew. Fifield releases these kind of what he calls his pups, which are little drones that map the structure. And Milburn's like a xenobiologist. And when and it's David who discovers this, they basically have CCTV footage that plays back into space, but whatever. It helps with the exposition. It looks cool. And it's alien, so I guess I don't fully understand why they do this, but plays back the idea that the space jockeys, what we learn in the space jockeys, are being pursued, are running away from something.
Jesus Christ, Amy. Look at the pile. Look how high up they are.
Yeah, it looks like they were running from something.
Okay. Don't touch, okay? And this thing is opened up from the inside. Almost like it's exploded.
It's like a scene out of some sort of Holocaust painting, you know?
And they get spooked. Fifield and Milburn get spooked and are like, we're out of here. Stuff happens. The whole crew get back to the ship Prometheus, because in sci-fi you always name your ship after something that bad happens to. Like, why does, it's like naming, we're on the spaceship Titanic. That's not foreboding at all. Or the Mary Celeste. Fucking idiots. They go to their ship and then realize that the geologist and the biologist aren't with them, and they call them, and it turns out they're lost.
We've been here before, Fifield.
I don't know. It all looks the same to me.
And then they get told that the drone has found the signs of life west, and that leads them to bunker down in the weird ceremonial room with the urns with the black goo, the very same room that Fifield and Milburn left because they were scared, right? Have decided to kind of like put on space blankets and sleep the night in. That's the third strike. And then there's this like swimming creature. What I realized in the second watch is the worms they keep on cutting to have been infected by the grey goo, by the black goo, and have kind of evolved into a larger worm. So rapid evolution.
Yeah.
I don't know. Kind of looks like...
What's that?
Oh my God, okay. Okay, just stay calm. Stay quiet. This is okay. I can handle this.
It ends up kind of like coming out of the water and raising itself at the biologist, who was the one that's like, I want to get out of here because I'm shit scared. And this creature that kind of goes into this attack stance.
Okay. Prometheus, we have 2.
Look at you. Look at you, baby. Jesus, look at the size of that. What is it?
You need to stay calm, okay?
What's there to be calm about?
You need to stay calm, because she is beautiful.
What the hell makes you think that's female?
Yeah, she's a lady, look.
Huh?
She's mesmerized.
That we recognize as threatening because it looks like a fucking cobra.
Yeah.
The biologist is like, oh, it's harmless.
Come here. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Hey, baby. You're strong.
4th strike until it attacks. And it's just like, how they did all these decisions in order to get in a situation where they can get attacked.
Yeah. What I buy is Rafe Spall's character being the stop freaking out about everything. And so this is the patterning and the loop that they've established. And also that he's excited by discovering alien life. I can buy both those things. What I don't buy is exactly what you've just said, is the coochie coochie coo moment.
All right.
Because no self-respecting scientist discussing or discovering alien life would fucking cuddle it.
Well, the other aspect to it is that they all take off their fucking helmets.
Mm-hmm.
Which is all the characters. Because one of them, like Holloway, because he's a dick, was like, it's breathable air. I'm taking it up. And it's like, cool. It may be oxygen. You know nothing about contagions. Has human history taught you nothing? Like, you're fucking idiots. They're not even that level of idiot in Alien. Like, all you're doing is making your crew, and they repeat the same problem in Alien Covenant and then double down to it because the contagion's airborne. Like, my God, you are letting your characters be stupid.
when they are supposed to be the smartest of characters in this kind of situation.
Yeah, Holloway could have left it off and the others are like, I'm not taking it off because you might get infected with something. And they end up putting him in quarantine because it turns out Holloway does get infected with something. But it's like, what a serious bunch of dumbasses. Like, hence Idiot Ball, right? Like, the rage this feels, what made Alien amazing was because it felt like the characters were behaving like actual people would in that situation. With caution.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. What made that work in Alien is Ripley is, in that first sequence, is the bitch.
She's Vickers.
People forget that in Alien, when it came out, people didn't know that Sigourney Weaver was going to be the final girl or the lead, and she certainly isn't set up that way at the front end of the movie. She is the bitch that is not letting them back onto the ship. And because the audience is on side of every other character, like, rescue those motherfuckers, they're okay with her caution being overridden. But there's no character being the voice of reason here. There's no debating of the decisions being made here.
All right, so you've got a fundamental bunch of problems. It's these two guys bugged off. They've clearly got this pup technology, right? So it's like, why don't they have the map? Why are they lost? Why did the ship on an alien planet that has a inter-solar system vessel not have some way to kind of keep GPS tracking on these people? Like, it's just a series of seriously stupid shit. All so we can get the first kill of Milbourne, and then Sean Harris is Phil turning up with all like a toxic monster from the end of RoboCop, right? So I went back. I'm like, seriously, I can't believe this. Like, this is really idiot. But I'm sorry, it is. I don't want to trash movies, but this is a series of, like, we're watching it going. I don't remember seeing it going, what? They're only doing this so they can have the kill.
Yeah. So this is a clear example of plot overriding character motivation. The story needed the plot to get to a certain point, so they have overrided what we would buy from the characters in that situation. Carry on.
So I was curious about what John Spates did. So there is a scene, there is a beat. They run off, like, they have the moment where, like, I'm fucking out of here. And they're like, I'm out of here too, right? So they chucking their shit, slightly scared. We come back to them. They're at some kind, and they call it like central New York Central Junction or something. They call out the fact that it's super confusing because there's just tunnels everywhere. And like Philfield was like, Milburn, get out the mapping module. And Milburn's like, I don't know the mapping module. Don't you have the mapping module? And they're like, fuck. Like they're calling out the fact that they've stormed off and don't know and got themselves lost. Like they've chucked a tanty. And I'm like, I'm okay with that. And they still find themselves back in that room where the creatures are. In this case, it's described more as a centipede rather than a worm. The worm doesn't look as immediately hostile. It's a centipede. And it like he's looking at it and it basically approaches him and he's not like coochie coochie coo. He's like, okay, let's not spook it. There's no mouth, nothing threatening. It climbs onto him and the big print specifically calls out that he does not notice the development when the creature produces a mouth.
So it's not swaying like a spitting cobra in front of him going...
No. And he actually makes a comment like, this is bug proof. This spacesuit's going to protect us. And so he's looking at it. And so it's more like that, you know, noticing an animal in the wild. If we don't spook the animal won't spook us. Interested, but detached enough. And then when the animal reveals its teeth, there's a beat when it turns around and he's like, get it off me. Like he's suddenly realized that he's got himself in a bad situation. And that's when, by trying to get up to him, it attacks. And I buy that in the context of the page so much more because it's like, I get that they run off. We've established that they're scared. 2, we see them like, because of that, they've made a bad decision to not bringing the mapping module. And yeah, it's future sci-fi, but I kind of, okay, you know, they need a mapping module because there's no satellites to have GPS. So, you know, let's be fair.
Science.
Science. But, you know, that's how GPS works, is satellites in space. So, you know, there's no satellites around this planet, but there's no like radio beacons or whatever, or that they don't have access to it, that they have screwed up and they make a guess, but they know they've screwed up. And they have a similar bit in Prometheus, like, I think we're lost, but it's like, how did you get yourselves lost? Surely, from what I've seen, you would have just walked back down that tunnel. In the script, they made a very specific moment of how they found themselves in a confusing spot. And 3rd, I just completely buy the motivation for how he interacts with that creature, because in Prometheus, there's no reason for him to be coochie coochie goo. The cobra could have still attacked him. He could be like, oh, it's nothing. And then it gets in attack stance and he's like, okay, I'm going to take a step back. And then it just lunges at him. It would have served exactly the same plot purpose.
Yeah.
All they're doing is basically saying that the crew of Prometheus are a bunch of incompetent a-holes who deserve to get wiped out. And that is in such a contrast to Alien, because as you say, what makes it work is that Ripley is super competent.
Yeah.
She is Vickers, right? And instead they turn Vickers into the oh, look at Vickers turning up with guys with like flamethrowers to quarantine things. And I'm like, that's exactly what Ripley would do. Like Ripley went to LV-426 to wipe the alien out. Like we're on her side. And it's just so weird that this film kind of twists what made Ripley such an interesting character, but not in a... And then Vickers runs in a straight line, which I know is a whole other problem, but... The giant ship behind me is falling forward.
I love that we're going through idiot ball examples without even mentioning the running in the straight line thing.
I kind of get it. Like, I'd probably just run in a straight line. I think the problem is that they cut to a wide shot because they want the audience to see the scale of the ship. When if we actually just kept it with her and we're just like on her face and anywhere she looks, it just looks like she can't escape from it. So she just keeps on running forward because, you know, it's the fastest way. But I think you could have got away with it. The problem is that it's a directorial thing rather than a narrative thing where they've gone to show the scale and you're like, turn right.
But you could say the same thing about the moment that you're talking about with Rafe Spall. That feels like a directorial thing. It's something that's happened in performance. It's something that's happened in the creature.
The creature. Oh, this is a cool creature design. Let's use this creature design as opposed to using it to scare the audience. I think that's going to trigger the biologist. I wish I know we're ragging on this film. We should give examples. I think the fact is John Spates had it. If you're going to have that, he actually had a pretty good job.
Yeah.
He had actually done a pretty good job to find that balance between I'm a biologist who's interested, but I'm going to be standoffish. I think that worked. He had actually done that work. I would have just gone keep that.
I want to kind of... I feel like we've done our job here somewhat, so I want to make an overarching...
Observation, yes, thank you. The red wine and the whiskey is kicking in. Which is,
what we're talking about is John Spates was aware of the questions moment to moment that the audience may be asking in a way that it feels like ultimately what made it to screen was not aware.
Yes.
Be that fair or be it not. So this is where I feel like this whole exercise is somewhat tricky and somewhat unfair, is that we can see here's a writer who knew exactly moment by moment on the page what he had to do to get the audiences through that decision, and somehow by the time it makes it to screen, that has been somewhat corrupted into a moment that we don't buy. So the other tricky thing is that means that there's an onus on the writer right at the beginning of the process to know, and I guess this is where craft and experience and talent comes from, is to know what questions are the audience going to be asking in a moment so that you can take it away. Now, you know that I kind of hate referencing script notes episodes, because as much as I love the podcast, I feel like they do what we do, but without going to anywhere near the amount of depth.
No, it's like with authority.
Yeah, with authority. So 2 episodes that they've done recently, one was plot holes, and what was fascinating to me is I think that what we're addressing is plot holes, but from character perspective. They're character holes rather than plot holes. They're not internal logic problems of the story, they're internal logic problems of how the audience perceives characters making decisions. And the second episode that really rang a bell for this one is their recent analysis of The Princess Bride, and they looked at how William Goldman, as in his approach to the whole script in terms of how he structured it, how he wrote it, how he approached the whole thing, was to always know what questions the audience was going to be asking and addressing those questions, and then completely ignoring every other question. So there's a ton of logic problems if you think about it, but he had such good control and knowledge over what questions the audience would be asking that he knew how to get those out the way and just play to the strengths of what he wanted to do.
I haven't listened to that episode yet. So do they use the terminology of audience, what questions the audience are asking?
Yeah. Oh, they acknowledge that the film has a ton of plot holes, and they look at the device, the structural device of, you know, the story being read out loud, the Gary Savage and Peter Falk, and that's the way that often Gary Savage's purpose in the film is to actually ask the questions that the audience would be asking.
Who's Gary Savage?
The boy in the bed.
Do you mean Kevin Savage?
It is not Kevin. We're both Googling this right now.
No, it's not. It's Fred.
Fred Savage. Okay.
He plays Kevin in The Wonder Years.
Okay. Fred Savage. Sorry. The purpose of, or a lot of the purposes solved by Fred Savage's character is that he asks what the audience would be asking at that point in time. Like, he often says, but Grandpa, why are they doing that? So, Stu, what have you learnt by this exercise, by this un-Draft Zero approach to problems?
You shouldn't do it again. No. Obviously, it's different because I've come prepared with solutions, right, that I've been thinking about. Whereas I think maybe, I mean, this is a little bit too meta, but maybe like having it more generally workshopy, like us just pitching things to each other that was like yes and would have been more effective.
Yes.
But hopefully it's illuminating nonetheless to hear us like just offer potential solutions. And in identifying problems, sometimes you learn what the solutions are. Because it makes me think, because it was in a writer's room this week, but that advice that I retweeted and we should put in the show notes about being a staff writer, and one of them was like, don't pitch problems, pitch solutions. And I think that's actually really good advice for this stuff. Like, it's easy for us to identify these problems, but really what is valuable is coming up with solutions, but understanding solutions in the context of like genre. And that's the difficulty. Something like the David thing, because I can imagine that comes from Ridley Scott. It's like, how do I do that and keep the director happy? Because there's a reason they've asked you to change it or are happy with your suggestion. And I don't know if I have any solutions right now about what that is. Or in the case of Sicario, they want to build this third film where it ends up being this other thing. It's like, how do we, I mean, the answer is it's always how do we get there, but not being afraid of character moments, I guess. Having moments of quietness or reflection, because almost all of our stuff, I mean, we're like, just add a scene here that does this. Like,
yeah,
it can help. And dramatic irony, like, it's that weird balance, knowing when to lean into dramatic irony, letting the audience know more, can kind of let it help us fill it in. And then also the flip side of knowing when to take stuff away. That's a really important skill to learn. And I don't know if I have all the answers to when that is. I mean, that's just experience, right?
Yeah. I think knowing what questions the audience is going to ask, that is a conscious exercise that you can go through. Like, you can read your script doing, almost like a pass, as if, let me put myself in the position of the audience and just try and step back and ask. Or you could give it to a reader friend and just say, at each point, please write down the questions that you're asking yourself at the bottom of each page, or every 3 pages, whatever it is. You can understand what an audience is thinking and then try to address those. What I think I've identified from this episode is, yes, time is always a constraint. Maybe all the things that we've identified, as you say, just hit the cutting room floor. They were shot, they were written, they might have made it, and then just not made it to screen because they as filmmakers decided it wasn't necessary in the moment. It may create problems after the film, but in the moment we can get people through it. But one of the things that this exercise has made me extremely conscious of is I feel that it's often a trade-off as to the in-the-moment experience of the audience and then the overall audience satisfaction of the film at the end of the film.
Mm.
And if you're ever arguing with a note, with a director, producer, exec, what have you, I feel like that is an essential tool to have, is what do you want the audience to feel about this film at the end, about this moment that we're talking about? How does it play in as to the overall experience at the end, not just fixing it in that moment in time?
Because when you rewatch, for those people that rewatch, but it's becoming more common now with streaming, we reassess decisions like David poisoning Holloway.
Yeah.
And also the whole film Twitter. Films no longer exist in that kind of vacuum of analysis, that they kind of almost have to be more watertight.
Yeah, I'm not just trying to say let's write films that have got no logic problems or character problems or plot holes in them, but I'm just talking about taking film Twitter out of it. If I'd watched Prometheus and when Wayland had came out, he said, I ordered David to poison Holloway because, I would have been fine with it. They would have explained that character motivation.
Yeah, well, they would have just transferred it onto, but why did you? Because I'm a dastardly villain that wants to live forever.
What have you? I mean, you don't need to do that per se, but my issue was, I remember at that moment in my first viewing of the film, experiencing that and going, I don't know why he's doing this, but I'm going to trust that the filmmakers will tell me why he's doing this later, and they never did.
They're actually hoping that you'll forget. On that note, we should probably wrap it up.
Yeah, I'm really conscious of all this stuff just because, and I'm really eager to have a back matter episode with you, because this is exactly the kind of thing that I've been experiencing in my career at the moment.
Yes.
But anyway, thank you, Stu, for finally, we were supposed to record this episode in 2018, and here we are in 2019 finally getting to it, but I'm glad we did. Thank you sublimely to our Patreons. The reason why we run a Patreon is because we would like to get you guys more Draft Zero more often. So if you would like that, please kindly become a Patreon. It's also to make sure that we don't go through advertising or other ways of incentivizing us to record more Draft Zero more often.
And if you don't feel like you want to become a patron, but would like, and/or you can be both crazy, and if you're a patron, you'll get a discount. You can also buy merchandise, Draft Zero hoodies, pillows, happy sacks, phone covers through a link in our show notes. We only make a few bucks off each purchase, but every buck counts.
Better than a slap in the face. And also, if you guys are one of those amazing listeners who just enjoys our podcast but can't afford to support us in any other way, please just spread the word. But you people who are spreading the word about Draft Zero, I would like you to give extra special thanks to our top tier patrons who contribute a lot to every single episode, namely Christopher Walker, Crob Edmonds, Murbib Musings, Paul Gregory, Rob Draper, and Sandra Willis. Bless you all.
You're amazing.
He's dead.
Just says no fire.
Grandpa, wait. What did Fezzik mean he's dead? I mean, he didn't mean dead. Wesley's only faking, right?
You want me to read this or not?
Who gets Humperdinck?
I don't understand.
Who kills Prince Humperdinck? At the end, somebody's got to do it. Is it Inigo? Who?
Nobody. Nobody kills him. He lives.
You mean he wins? Jesus, Grandpa, what did you read me this thing for?
If you feel so compelled to argue with Chaz and myself about anything on this episode or anything in general, you can find many ways to contact us at draft-zero.com.
And there you will also find the show notes for this episode, as well as links to
share the word and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts.
And if you're feeling even more supportive, you can also find links to our Patreon page.
And thanks for listening.